In honor of the new series Alien Earth, I helped my buddy and Instagrammer Jimmy G, the Italian Guerilla Gorilla, create a short alien fan film. But here's the catch. We had no budget. Or crew. Just an iPhone 16 Pro, a costume, a 3D printed prop, a pop-up green screen, and a badass shotgun. Along the way, we picked up a few inexpensive, off-the-shelf lights, but for the most part, we just worked with what we had. And I'm going to walk you through the entire pipeline, from concept to delivery, and show you how we put it all together and reframe what's possible. But before I do that, I'm going to need you to render me out a like and hit that subscribe button for more tips, tutorials, and interviews for the indie filmmaker. And a lot of the methods and techniques I'm going to cover in this behind-the-scenes look can be found in my book, Shooting for VFX, Your On-Set Guide to Saving Money in Post-Production. So if you'd be so inclined, please head over to my website at the link below or at this QR code here and get your copy today. Now with that out of the way, let me take you back to the beginning. My buddy Jimmy G, the Italian Guerilla Gorilla, is an Army veteran Instagrammer who's been creating content about firearms, knives, everyday personal protection, and home defense on his Instagram channel for a few years now, and recently he just made the move to YouTube, starting his first channel. And please go subscribe. He's an awesome dude creating some really cool content, link in the description below. So among the various types of content he's creating, he started a series where he combines his passions for firearms with cosplay, prop making, and storytelling, creating characters and stories inspired by the interesting and unique pieces he collects. Recently, Jimmy acquired a shotgun that looks like it belongs in the universe of the Alien franchise, like way more than the actual shotguns they had in the film. And with the release of the series Alien Earth, he was inspired to convert his 12-gauge Kel-Tec KS7 bullpup shotgun into what he's dubbed the Weyland-Yutani 7SG, the new standard for the Colonial Marines. Now when Jimmy approached me to collaborate on the short, he gave me a lot of leeway in terms of execution. He just wanted a cool scene to feature his new shotgun and costume. He sent me some photos of an area of his property he thought we could film around, but other than that, I basically had free reign. So to help me bang out ideas for shots and story, I went into Blender and recreated the location. But this step was crucial when it came to shot planning. More on that in a second. Now once I was happy with the general specs of the model, I brought in some elements from Kitbash 3D and mocked up a rough idea of what the location could eventually look like in the final film. But before I could start finding my shots, I needed a stand-in for Jimmy. Now you could use some basic geometry or a free rigged model of any humanoid or dummy as a placeholder, but I chose to quickly rough out his likeness in Realusion's character creator. Then using AccuRig, I had a rigified model optimizing it for Blender. Now I could just drop in my virtual Jimmy and pose him as needed. From here, I was just able to workshop the scene, testing out different lenses and lighting configurations. And without any real script to speak of, this process really allowed me to find the story and find the shots. And knowing what we had to work with really determined what we could capture with the resources we had and didn't have. For instance, I knew that if I wanted to capture this frame, I would have to put up a green screen behind him in order to make the set extension work. But if I wanted to capture this frame, I probably wouldn't need any VFX at all. At this point, I've been working out the scene, playing with the blocking, pacing, and frame composition, but I can't help but think I'm missing something. What's missing from this Alien fan film? Oh yeah, an alien. That's when I found this awesome, fully rigged 3D model of a Xenomorph on TurboSquid. Not super expensive, but before we spend the money on this model, I hopped over to CG Trader where I found a free low-poly Xenomorph, also rigged, that I can pose and block out my scene with. I know going into this that we'll have extremely limited resources, and while I want to create the most dynamic shots possible, I need to be practical. I know that we won't have the resources of a major studio, or even an indie film for that matter. We won't be shooting on a green screen stage or have a techno crane, cinema camera, or even crew to speak of, so I need to choose my shots based on what we have available to us, both on set and in post. For instance, if I want to add this Xenomorph to a scene, I want to avoid any major problems that come from camera tracking. See this video about my 4 levels of camera movement and how they can make your VFX harder, or easier. I also don't want to get too bogged down on animating the alien, so I want to keep it to short, manageable poses and save any major moves for the last shot, which I plan on keeping down to only a few frames for dramatic effect. I'm also planning on cutting between a close-up shot of Jimmy and a close-up of the alien, minimizing their interaction. If I have them grabbing at each other or physically interacting, that can make the work far more complex and lead to more time and money spent in the long run. Once I rendered out all my frames, I took all the shots into Premiere, pieced everything together, and now I had a full rough cut of the film well before our shoot date. So this shoot was a lot of fun. It really took me back to my early days of guerrilla filmmaking, which felt appropriate seeing as we're making this video for the Italian Guerilla Gorilla, so I wouldn't have it any other way. Now to light our location, again, we're working with a budget, so we found these amazing Black & Decker LED work lights. These little guys put out about 1,000 lumens and create a nice cinematic look to these rolling shutter doors. And in a pinch, I could even clamp these work lights onto an extra tripod and quickly run them to where I needed more light. For the most part, one for backlighting and another light to light our green screen. For fill, I used Jimmy's USB-powered LED studio lights, connected to a Jackery power station. It was super handy and super easy to move around where I needed. Now, I by no means consider myself a top-tier cinematographer, and to call our lighting setup indie would be generous. That said, I found these off-the-shelf items surprisingly effective, extremely fast and easy to set up, and honestly, ideal for a 1 to 2 person crew. Now, as far as shooting, we captured everything on Jimmy's iPhone 16 Pro, shot on a DJI Osmo Mobile 7P, using the free Blackmagic Cam app to control the camera settings. Now, this was my first time shooting on an iPhone 16 and using the Blackmagic app in a production setting, so admittedly, some of my shots were a little grainier and not quite as sharp as I had intended, but overall, I'm super happy with how the footage came out, and I look forward to our next iPhone production down the line. Now let's get into the VFX. As I mentioned, a crucial component to shooting VFX is planning for VFX. So having my storyboards handy and accessible on set was truly invaluable. It doesn't just help you to know what you're going to shoot, but by planning every shot so thoroughly, you'll also be able to roll with any changes or unforeseen problems that come along the way. For instance, when we shoot in this direction, the green screen worked out great. It covered the area we needed to cover to make the set extension work, but when we flipped the scene and shot the reverse, there was a really big tree with branches right where I needed to place the screen. Since I couldn't get the screen to overlap with the edge of the building, I had to place the screen a little further away from the garage, which meant I'd need to rotoscope anything that crosses this area. To help mitigate this problem, I just reframed the image ever so slightly so Jimmy's head and body covered the gap between the garage and the green screen, helping reduce excessive rotoscoping later down the line. Another cool element about shooting this was Jimmy's awesome prop motion tracker. This thing was cool. He found an inexpensive 3D printed kit on Etsy and assembled and painted it himself. And while it was an awesome prop, it did lack a working display for the motion tracking screen to be seen. Now, one of the most common visual effects we provide are screen comps, so this would be no different. But to make this one really sell, I wanted to have some actual light emitting from the device. To create this, I used a flexible electroluminescent panel. What makes this awesome is that you can cut the sheet to whatever shape you want. As long as the sheet is still attached to the power cord, it lights up. Even in shots without VFX like this, you can see the light emitting from the screen, bringing in an extra level of realism. Now let's talk about our Xenomorph. On set, I wanted to have a shooting reference, so I found a free 3D model of the alien bust on Thingiverse. Then I 3D printed it and sprayed it with a few sloppy coats of gloss to give it a slimy sheen. Now you may notice I didn't print it to scale, so the depth of field reference wouldn't necessarily be accurate, but it did give me a good idea of what my lighting should look like, and also I just kind of wanted an excuse to 3D print a Xenomorph, so yeah. Now the final component of the shoot, in fact the main inspiration for the whole shoot, is the shotgun. You might have noticed that we got some incredibly accurate muzzle flash and reactive lighting happening in camera. And that's because we shot it for real, with blanks.
3, 2, 1.
So being that Jimmy is a gun tuber, we thought it important to authentically show what the shotgun is capable of as practically as possible. In fact, we also filmed a few takes of him firing live Dragon's Breath rounds on his home range, which was just spectacular.
Fire! 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 Oh, Jesus.
These days, most productions are opting for digital muzzle flash, as it's much safer, and that is our bread and butter here at VFX To Go, but with Jimmy being a career Army veteran and a highly experienced shooting instructor, safety was paramount and we took every precaution on set. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road. Now is when we find out if all that planning and careful attention on set pays off. Once I got everything imported and organized, I made my edit and sorted shots by the types of visual effects they'd require. In the coming weeks, I'll do more comprehensive breakdowns of how I did some of the VFX shots as more of a tutorial, but for now I'm going to try and go over the broader strokes of how they were created. I first started with the motion tracker screens. As I mentioned earlier, the electroluminescent or EL screens were great in giving us that interactive light. The only issue I had with them was that after you cut it, the little areas of the film that break contact with the panel lost their luminosity. But as we were going to replace the whole screen anyway, the texture just gave Mocha Pro a better surface to track, so that actually helped us out in this case. While I was in Mocha, I quickly rotoscoped the housing of the tracker, as I knew I'd want to replace the background with a more concrete industrial surface rather than the grassy field we were shooting in. Now, I was able to find a number of YouTube videos that people had posted recreating the motion tracker screen, presumably for cosplayers to play them on their mobile devices or homemade props, but the animation wasn't exactly doing what we needed it to do for our particular story. So in After Effects, I meticulously recreated the interface and animated it to match the beats in our story. Lastly, in 2 of the shots, the composition was just wide enough that you could see the wires leading to the EL panel. Since the screen was just glued on, this was just part of it, and while Jimmy and I discussed leaving it in there as it might give it a more industrial tech look, eventually I gave in and I just wanted to paint it out. For our Xenomorph, we purchased the previously mentioned model from TurboSquid and brought that into Blender. Since I wanted to keep everything to just a handful of close-up shots, I found it faster to just hand animate the movements I wanted rather than do any performance capture. The lighting and depth of field really helped sell the close-up. And in After Effects, I added some slime elements from FootageCrate.com and some breath elements from FXElements.com to really give it some life. That just leaves us with our 2 fully CG establishing shots. Our opening shot was fairly simple, using some space elements from the Astra pack from BigFilms.shop, but it was the shot on the planet's surface I had the most fun with. As I mentioned earlier, I roughed out what the location might look like in pre-production using elements from Kitbash 3D in Blender. Now I expanded on it, trying out a few variations of looks, eventually landing on this walled-off outpost look, and I was really psyched when I found this cool spacecraft. See, originally I was going to have Jimmy looking at it escaping in a rover, but this ship looked way more in-universe to me, so I couldn't pass it up. Once I had the look of the outpost locked in, I dropped in a matte painting, smoke, and atmosphere, and rendered out a few more lighting and depth passes to fine-tune the look, and there you have it. All in all, I was able to crank out the post-production in about a week, and I'm pretty happy with the results. Are there things that could have been done better with more resources? Absolutely. But the point of this shoot was to just make something with what we had, and we had so much fun doing it. I hope this video gives you some ideas or inspiration to create something amazing, even without a full camera crew or the most expensive gear. And I'm including a full list of the gear that we used on this shoot in the description below. By clicking on our affiliate links, you'll be supporting this channel and helping us create more content like this in the future. And of course, if you found this video helpful, remember to render me out a like and hit that subscribe button for more videos like this for the indie filmmaker. As always, I've been Jake, and remember, together we can reframe what's possible.